the cameras caught it, the tears welling up. The deep breath she took before facing the press. Alex Eala had just been handed her first bagel in 17 months, and the exhaustion from 8 matches in 12 days was written all over her face. But what she said next, fighting back those tears, wasn't a lament, it was a promise. The scoreboard told one story, but the cameras captured another, 6-4-6-0. In just 73 minutes, Belinda Bencic had dismantled Eala's 7-match winning streak and ended her Canadian Open campaign in the round of 16. The Swiss Olympic gold medalist had cracked the code against the Filipinos' left-handed game, standing close to the baseline and unleashing powerful ground strokes that left Eala scrambling. But as Eala walked off center court at SoBi Stadium, the cameras caught something else, the tears welling up, the deep breath she took before facing the press, the exhaustion written across her face. The 21-year-old Filipina, who had just won her first WTA title in Washington and extended her winning streak to 7 matches, had finally run out of steam. The match had been a battle of missed opportunities. At 4-4 in the first set with Eala serving, Bencic had a break point. Eala hit a powerful serve that Bencic barely returned. It allowed Eala to move forward with an open court, but she hit her forehand back toward Bencic, who executed a perfect lob over the Filipina. That moment changed everything. Eala's movement was less sharp, her shots were less precise, and Bencic raced to a double break lead in the second set, dictating the pace with blazing shots from the baseline. At 5-0, Bencic closed out the match with a punishing serve that caught Eala off balance. The Filipina had no answers. After a DC Open run in which she had seemed capable of overcoming any deficit, her magic ran out in Toronto. But as she left the court, the cameras captured something else. The Filipino fans in Toronto serenaded her with cheers as she waved and blew kisses to the crowd. The 10,000-plus fans who had packed SoBi's stadium didn't stop cheering. They knew what the box score couldn't capture. This wasn't the end of a story. It was just a chapter. The exhaustion was visible. The emotion was raw. And for the first time, Alex Eala let the world see what this grueling run had cost her. After 73 minutes on center court, after a 6-4, 6-0 defeat that snapped her 7-match winning streak, Eala sat down for her post-match press conference. The words came slowly at first, then with growing clarity. "Yeah, it's always tough, of course, after a loss. But like I said, I'm looking back at these past 2 weeks as a really big positive. I think I've played really well. I've gotten through so many obstacles." But then came the admission that made the room pause. Of course, right now there's that initial, just kind of a little tired and down from the match. The numbers told the story of her exhaustion. She had played 8 matches in roughly 12 days, winning 7 in hugely impressive fashion. The stretch began with her title-winning campaign at the Washington Open, where she played 5 matches over 6 days, culminating in a rain-delayed final that stretched across 2 days. Then she flew straight to Toronto and added 3 more victories to extend her winning streak to 7 matches, the longest of her career. The physical toll was evident. After shaking hands with Bencic, Eala returned to her bench, visibly drained. There was no exuberant celebration, no raised arms, no triumphant roar. Just exhaustion. Pure, unadulterated exhaustion. But even in her exhaustion, Eala refused to make excuses. She acknowledged the struggle, but she also acknowledged the privilege of the struggle. But I'm healthy, which is something I'm super grateful for. It's something that's obviously on the top of my priority all the time. She credited Bencic for the performance that ended her run. "Yeah, tough one today. I think Belinda put me in some tough situations. I think she played really well. I wasn't able to kind of get myself out of a certain mode." The fatigue from 8 matches in 12 days had finally caught up with her. But instead of dwelling on the defeat, Eala was already looking ahead. To Cincinnati, to New York, to the next chapter of her extraordinary journey. "I'm counting my blessings. I'm taking the lessons that I've had from these 2 weeks and hopefully implementing them even more in a better way in Cincinnati and New York." The tears had been held back. The exhaustion had been acknowledged. But the promise to come back stronger had been made. and the cameras had captured it all. The cameras had captured the tears welling up in her eyes. But what they couldn't capture was the roar of the crowd that refused to let her walk off that court in silence. They had sold out the stadium. They had filled the stands with red, white, and blue flags. They had chanted her name until their voices gave out. The Filipino diaspora in Toronto had transformed the National Bank Open into something the tournament had never seen before. Tickets for Eala's matches had sold out in minutes. The tournament had added chicken adobo and lumpiang Shanghai to the menu for the first time in its history. The 10,000-plus center court had been packed with Filipino fans waving flags, turning the venue into a sea of red, white, blue, and yellow. It's the kind of noise that accompanies a Grand Slam win, and this is just the second round here in Toronto. Play-by-play man Mark Petchy said on the WTA Tour World Television feed after Eala's opening victory. The one and only, the extraordinary Alex Eala doing things in tennis that just seem out of this world. The scenes at Sobeys Stadium had been unlike anything the Canadian Open had ever witnessed. The tournament director, Carl Hale, who had been running the Canadian Open for nearly 2 decades, was stunned by the phenomenon. "We've never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this type of effect," Hale told reporters. "A sold-out Wednesday night this early in the tournament is really unheard of." The support extended beyond the stadium. Even the concession stands got into the spirit, selling chicken adobo rice bowls and lumpia. A Filipino flag was displayed at the food stall, and fans queued up to try the local favorites. "It's the first time I've ever heard of a tournament halfway through adding a food offering just because of a player," Hale admitted. The crowd had followed her from Washington, where tournament chairman Mark Ein revealed that at least 80% of ticket inquiries, if not more, were about Alex Eala. They had come to Toronto in even greater numbers. And now, as she prepared to leave, they were not going to let her go quietly. And as Eala walked off center court for the final time, waving to the crowd and blowing kisses, the stands erupted one final time. The chants of "Eala, Eala!" echoed through the night. The crowd that had come to watch her play was now serenading her goodbye. Even her opponents couldn't help but admire the atmosphere. Belinda Bencic, the woman who had ended Eala's run, praised the energy after her victory. "I know most of you guys were cheering for Alex, but I still have to say it was very nice for me to play in front of you all. Thank you so much for the great crowd tonight. It's the pleasure of my life to experience crowds like this," Eala said in her post-match press conference. The farewell wasn't about defeat. It was about gratitude, and the crowd that wouldn't stop cheering made sure she knew it. The most emotional moment came not on the court, but in the press conference room. A reporter asked Alex Eala about the overwhelming support she had received throughout the tournament. Her response brought tears to the room. You can see I am kind of just like a drop in the ocean, when it comes to Filipinos and their pride for their culture and where they come from," Eala said, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. "Me, I do a lot to kind of represent my country, and I'm very proud of it. But you see, the stadium was full of people who do the same thing, right?" She paused, gathering her thoughts. "So I guess that just shows you what kind of a community we are, and what kind of a people we are, and how supportive we are of each other." The words struck a chord with everyone who heard them. Eala wasn't just a tennis player to the Filipino diaspora. She was a symbol, a reminder of home, of identity, of a culture that spans the globe. And in that moment, she reminded everyone that she doesn't carry the weight of a nation alone. She carries it alongside the millions who support her. "The atmosphere this whole week has been just incredible," she said. "It's hard to describe to other people, kind of the feeling of being in that stadium full of fans and all the love. I'm super grateful for the experiences that I've had here in Toronto. It's been an amazing debut, so yeah, I'll carry these memories with me for a really long time." The scenes at Sobeys Stadium had been unlike anything the Canadian Open had ever witnessed. The tournament had sold chicken adobo and lumpiang Shanghai for the first time in its history. The 10,000-plus fans had packed center court, waving Philippine flags and turning the venue into a sea of red, white, blue, and yellow. One supporter even wore a blue dinosaur costume decorated with a Philippine flag, becoming one of the tournament's unexpected social media attractions. Even the concession stands reflected the phenomenon, with tournament director Carl Hale admitting, "It's the first time I've ever heard of a tournament halfway through adding a food offering just because of a player." Eala also brought Filipino touches into her own presentation, wearing sampaguita earrings gifted to her by local jewelry brand Christine D. Jewelry, and sporting a Nike visor embroidered with the words, "Kapag lumago, hindi na hihinto." "I learned that they're very passionate, they're very kind. I learned that it's very multicultural. It's a mixing pot of cultures and personalities and passions, I guess," Eala said of Toronto. "It's nice to see tennis be a medium for them to come together and kind of celebrate the things they love." Even her opponents couldn't help but admire the atmosphere. Belinda Bencic, the woman who had ended Eala's run, praised the energy after her victory. "I know most of you guys were cheering for Alex, but I still have to say it was very nice for me to play in front of you all. Thank you so much for the great crowd tonight." Katty McNally also left Toronto with gratitude, thanking Filipino supporters for the energy they brought to the tournament. "It's the pleasure of my life to experience crowds like this," Eala said. "I'm counting my blessings. I'm taking the lessons that I've had from these 2 weeks and hopefully implementing them even more in a better way in Cincinnati and New York." And with that, she reminded the world that she carries her country with her wherever she goes. The cameras had captured the tears welling up in her eyes. They had captured the deep breath she took before facing the press. They had captured the exhaustion written across her face. But what they couldn't capture was the promise she made that night. Not to herself, not to her team, but to the thousands of Filipino fans who had transformed a tennis tournament into a celebration of pride. "I'm counting my blessings," Eala said, her voice steady despite the defeat. "I'm taking the lessons that I've had from these 2 weeks and hopefully implementing them even more and in a better way in Cincinnati and New York." The promise was simple, but its weight was immense. The journey to that promise had been grueling. 8 matches in 12 days across 2 countries, a WTA 500 title in Washington that had catapulted her to a career-high No. 20 ranking, a 7-match winning streak that had carried her through Toronto, and finally a 6-4, 6-0 loss to Olympic gold medalist Belinda Bencic that snapped the streak and ended her Canadian Open campaign in the round of 16. The exhaustion was written all over her face. After 73 minutes on center court, after a defeat that left her with her first bagel since March 2025, Eala sat in the press room and let the world see what this run had cost her. "Of course, right now there's that initial kind of just a little tired and down from the match," she admitted. She had been honest about the toll of her Washington Open victory, where she played 5 matches over 6 days. She had acknowledged the strain of transitioning from that high straight into the Canadian Open, where she faced 2 grueling battles against Alicia Parks and Katty McNally before meeting Bencic. But she refused to let the result overshadow what she had accomplished. It's always tough, of course, after a loss. But like I said, I'm looking back at these past maybe 2 weeks as a really big positive. I think I've played really well. I've gotten through so many obstacles. And then came the words that would define her farewell. "I definitely will take maybe 2 days off, a day or 2. I do have to travel to Cincinnati," she said, a smile breaking through the exhaustion. "I need to get a haircut. I haven't gotten a haircut in a while. My nails are grown out." She laughed. And in that moment, the weight of the past 2 weeks seemed to lift, if only for a second. "I'll do a couple things, just to get my mind off tennis. I think Toronto's a great place to do that." The city that had embraced her like family would now have to say goodbye. But Eala promised to come back stronger. She leaves the Canadian Open with 81,800, roughly P4.9 million, for reaching the round of 16. She will also share $15,800 with Venus Williams after their first round run in doubles. Now she heads to Cincinnati for the next WTA 1000 event, where she will be seeded number 18, receiving a first-round bye. Then the U.S. Open awaits. I'm counting my blessings, Eala said. I'm taking the lessons that I've had from these 2 weeks and hopefully implementing them even more and in a better way in Cincinnati and New York. The tears had been held back. The exhaustion had been acknowledged. But the promise to come back stronger had been made, and the cameras had captured it all. What happens when a young woman from Manila walks off a court in defeat, but leaves an entire city in tears? What happens when her farewell isn't about the loss, but about the love she found? And when Alex Eala steps onto the court in Cincinnati, will the world finally understand that her story is far from over? The cameras captured Alex Eala fighting back tears after her Canadian Open exit. The defeat was decisive, the exhaustion was real. But her farewell was not one of defeat. It was one of gratitude, resilience, and hope. She called Toronto an amazing debut, described herself as a drop in the ocean when it comes to Filipino pride, and promised to come back stronger in Cincinnati and New York. The journey continues. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you the biggest stories in tennis, drama, and emotion every single week. Don't miss what happens next.